Hello and welcome to another edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallen. Well, everything from the Pope to party platforms to the debates, it all seems to be impacting the polls. There's a lot of shape shifting going on still. What does it all mean as we sit here 1 week out from the campaign? Darrell Bricker, who is the global CEO for Ipsos Public Affairs, global CEO. And he has been with us throughout this campaign with his insights and comments. So let's start right there, Darrell. Like, you wake up in the morning and now the Pope has passed away. I know this is a huge issue for billions of people around the world, or a billion plus, and for many others. It's kind of kicked the campaign off the airwaves for a day. Will it have an impact?
Yeah, well, if you're in a situation where you're trying to catch a front runner, not being able to be the center of attention on the nightly news is not something that you want to see. So, as unfortunate as obviously it is for the Pope and for Catholics and the Catholic Church, for the conservatives, not being able to be out there trying to deliver their message is also a problem.
The flip side, I guess, is that it's good news for Mark Carney. The release of his party platform and the costing thereof, around $130 billion, seemed to be really having a negative impact. He was taking a lot of heat even from liberals.
Well, over the last 2 weeks, we've really seen the conservatives start to close the gap. And the more attention that there has been on Mr. Carney and his campaign, particularly outside of the very exclusive positioning that he has on being able to deal with Donald Trump in the United States, the more he's actually talking about himself and what his government would do and his platform and his spending, and getting dragged back into a conversation about the Liberal Party record over the last 10 years. None of that is good for his campaign. So, distracting away from that is an issue. I mean, I think the most powerful issue, and it's taken the conservatives some time to come up with this positioning. The most powerful positioning against Mark Carney is we can't give the Liberals a fourth term.
Right.
And it brings into focus all of these issues that we're talking about right now. So the conservatives seem to finally have got some traction. They've been spinning their wheels since the start of the campaign. They finally have some traction, and they get a bit of bad luck, I would say. Obviously, we don't want to look at this entirely through the election, the focus of the election. It's obviously tragic news for the Pope and Catholics, but the reality in terms of Canadian politics is those wheels will be spinning a bit more for a bit longer.
One of the critiques of the Carney costing of the platform and putting it out there, and of course he is a policy wonk, right? So he wants to talk about all of this stuff in great detail. And I've heard actually liberal commentators saying this, which is, look, this has been all packaged. We just had to kind of tweak it a bit, raising that whole argument again that this is really Trudeau with a few tweaks and spins on the top, add a layer of Donald Trump, but it's still the kind of spending that we've seen over a decade.
Yeah, and this is the problem. Even if it wasn't something that the Liberals had put together, and we could make that argument, but even if it was not something that the Trudeau team had put together, and Mark Carney just changed the name on the cover of the book, I mean, who knows what the truth of all of this is?
Yeah.
But the fact that they have kind of one approach to dealing with public policy problems in the country, which is ramping up spending, puts you back in line with what the Trudeau government would do. So if they're known for anything, apart from some of the identity politics things that they've been doing and a few things that people would claim were actually good things that they may have done over the years, the biggest thing that they're known for is probably their profligacy, the fact that they were a big spending government. So if Mark Carney is simply following along the lines of that, it does look like a fourth term. So they've got to be very cautious on how they position this, because the more they look like what was before, the worse it is for Mark Carney to present himself as any form of change.
Before we come back to the debates, because we haven't even touched on that seems like a lifetime ago. I've had a few friends call me and say, why is Pierre Poilievre talking about straws, plastic straws and plastic bags? And I'm going, look, I think it's one of the smarter things he's done, which is it's a touchstone for the base. And it represents a whole lot of issues and concerns about government in your life and in your face.
Yeah, for particularly for conservative voters, this idea that you can't use a plastic straw is really seems like to them government overreach. But the biggest problem that exists is nobody likes paper straws. I mean,
That
that's the problem.
count me in. You can't even
Yeah,
go to the
very
Dairy
few
Queen.
people. I think people can see the virtue of paper straws, but in terms of their functionality and a preference, I mean, I don't think that there's any question that people prefer
Yeah.
plastic straws. So the idea that, you know, the government kind of intervened in what to many people seems like overreach and kind of pointless and to go after plastic straws, and you know, it was a symbolic way, kind of like they did with plastic garbage bags and
Right.
things of that nature. The plastic straws was just a step too far for most people, and the reason is because there was no reasonable substitute in their minds, I think. So Poilievre pushing back on that is not bad positioning, although he's got to also be careful because it's something that Donald Trump has been pushing back on too.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's this week then in the next remaining days. Each of these leaders are going to be I heard Mark Carney talking about healthcare. Everybody's trying to touch every base for 5 minutes. They've all laid out their big platform issues. Now it's reminding this subgroup and that subgroup that they're with you, that they're their voice.
Yeah, and getting to the fundamental ballot question and fighting over what that is. Prior to the campaign starting, the ballot question was really clear: time for a change.
Yeah.
And through the course of the election campaign, as a result of the fact that there's a new leader of the Liberal Party, and also because of what Donald Trump has done, the Liberal Party has been able to push the idea that really this is about leadership and that Mark Carney is a superior leader. We're at one of those inflection points where the public's kind of 50-50 on what the ballot question is. The more it's for change, the more it favors Poilievre, the more it's for leadership, the more it favors Carney. And over the space of this past weekend, and through the course of the rest of the week, I think people are going to sort it out, but it is very close. Just to remind anybody who's watching this, most of the elections since 2000, the year 2000, have not been majorities; they've been minorities.
Right.
And even the majorities have been, 9 points. Nobody's winning by 12, 15 points anymore. And my expectation is what you're going to see through this week is things will tighten up.
So that's where we've already heard the NDP say, okay, we're just there to keep a rein on them and to be their conscience. And of course, the Bloc is there to say we want more. But Pierre Poilievre can't really say, look, at least if you're going to vote Liberal, give them a minority government so that they can't go crazy. So he's in a bit of a bind. He's got to be going for gold, right? Just give me the majority. Yeah.
No, well, I think what he's got to say is vote for change, vote for me, and whatever the results are going to be, that's what we will get. But if you're for change, if you want to go in a different direction than this country is going right now, you can't give this government a fourth term. And that second part is something that they really hadn't emphasized, but they're really hitting hard now. And I actually think that that's very good positioning. And then on the other side, I think that you're going to see the Liberals, because I do expect the polls to tighten through the course of the week.
Yeah.
The Liberals will come back with their greatest hits, which are usually related to things like abortion, gun crime, those kinds of things, and really emphasizing that Trudeau's that Poilievre is a tiny Trump.
Yeah.
I expect them to actually go quite dark.
Yeah, they were running ads on that, which putting Poilievre and Trump side by side, and we haven't seen it for a while, but they may well bring that back out again.
Well, because it works really well for them.
Yeah.
So I expect the end of the campaign, pardon me, will be fighting over what that ballot question is. For the Liberals, we want you thinking about leadership as you enter the voting booth. For Conservatives, we want you thinking about change.
The new Conservative ads that are out, Stephen Harper obviously repeating what he said at the big rally in Alberta, which is, I've worked with them both. If I have to pick one, it'll be Pierre. But the other ad with no Pierre Poilievre in it, to boomer guys out golfing on a golf course talking about change in the one person in a very subtle way. So two things I'd like to hear you on, taking Poilievre out of the ad. And does that mean they're trying to go for the older men? They seem to have the younger men, but they're trying to reach out to the boomer men too and make that argument about the fourth term.
Yeah, there's a big gender gap. And so the idea that the Conservatives will appeal disproportionately to women in this campaign, probably not. But that group of male voters who don't necessarily like older male voters, don't necessarily like the direction of the country, may not be that keen on Poilievre, but want to see change. They're accessible to them. And I actually think, I've obviously been on social media just as you have and seen all sorts of critiques of whether it's a good ad or not.
Right.
We can argue about the aesthetics, but the message and the target, spot on.
Yeah. And does Harper help or hurt?
Harper helps. Because Stephen Harper presided over the good old days. When things seemed canvassing to really be on track, and then Trudeau came in and he had about 2 good years, but everything after that, Trudeau really struggled. It was funny. Stephen Harper tended to grow on people. Justin Trudeau tended to go in the other direction, whatever you want to call that. So he had his first days were his best days, and then he declined right to the very end, and when even his own party turned on him. Stephen Harper went in the other direction until the 2015 election. 2004, 2006, 2008, 2011, he got better all the way along. And I think people look back at that time as maybe not, with the same glossy, Vaseline lens that they may look back at in the 1970s at Pierre Trudeau, particularly for baby boomers. A big time, slightly older group, maybe more Gen X, looking back on the Mulroney years as being something that was positive. Some people look back on the Chrétien years, but Harper, I think history is going to be kinder to Harper than, particularly contemporary history, will be kinder to Harper than the voters were back in 2015. But he didn't lose by a lot. I mean, he got 31% of the vote. The Conservative vote didn't collapse. But people do look back to him as being a prime minister who was successful. And particularly that group of people that we were just talking about, men of a certain generation. Mm-hmm. I think Stephen Harper was more their type of leader. They're not as comfortable with Pierre Poilievre, so bringing Stephen Harper back on the stage is a good idea. Just by the way, as Mark Carney brings Jean Chrétien out, we haven't seen. Obviously Justin Trudeau's in witness protection someplace. We haven't seen hide nor hair of him for the entire campaign. But Jean Chrétien, for a guy in his 90s, is blocking a lot of time on the Liberal campaign. Yeah. So, there is a nostalgia aspect to this that I think Stephen Harper brings to the table in a positive way, and also so does Jean Chrétien.
Yeah. You just made a comment about, Harper doing not that badly in 2015, even despite the loss, 32 points. The Conservatives today are at 38, something like that. Is that about right? But this is where we get into this whole horse race and the voter efficiency, because people say to themselves, oh, the polls are tightening. That means change is possible. Maybe the Conservatives will pull this out. And then you try to explain where the huge vote counts are, downtown Toronto, Montreal, BC, that, to match an Alberta vote or a Saskatchewan vote, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, each campaign that happens in Canada is not actually a national campaign, it's an individual campaign in ridings. So depending on where the votes are distributed, 31 could be a really good number, or 31 could be a really bad number in terms of the number of seats that you get for it. What I would say is that there are 2 campaigns going on right now. There's one that is west of the Ontario-Manitoba border, and then there's one that's east of the Ontario-Manitoba border. East of the Ontario-Manitoba border, it is the Liberals are looking very good. So they're ahead in Ontario, they're ahead in Quebec, and they're ahead in Atlantic Canada. Now, the issue for the Conservatives is Ontario and Quebec is where most of the seats are. You've heard every person who lives west of Ontario say the election's over by the time our vote is counted. Right. So I'll give you a couple of nuances though.
Okay,
So the west of the Ontario border, what we're seeing is that the Conservatives are catching up and even passing the Liberals, even in British Columbia. So the Conservatives are doing a bit better in British Columbia, not as well downtown. The NDP isn't doing as well as the Conservatives need the NDP to do. Manitoba, the NDP is actually doing reasonably well. I actually expect that the NDP might perform a little bit better on election day than people think, just because their vote is very concentrated.
yeah. In terms of seat count, you mean, yeah.
Yeah. So west of the Ontario-Manitoba border, it looks conservative. You might see a couple of seats in Edmonton. You might even see a couple of seats in Calgary. You might see a couple of Liberal seats in Saskatchewan. Certainly, the Liberals will probably do better than the NDP in British Columbia. So I think there's going to be more red on the map in Western Canada than we've seen in some time. And then you get east of the Manitoba-Ontario border, and this is where it gets confusing, Senator. So the Liberals are leading in Ontario. So the question is their lead a function of doing really, really downtown, better downtown than they normally do? And by downtown, I mean downtown Toronto, downtown Ottawa,
city
downtown
cores,
London, downtown Hamilton. So they're trouncing the NDP in those places. So what that is actually an inefficient vote. Just like the Alberta and Saskatchewan vote is inefficient in those two places, just to explain it. And I know this is what we're supposed to be talking about. So Alberta and Saskatchewan, the Conservatives get way more votes than they need for the seats that they win.
Right.
So they really overperform or over-index in those
They win ridings by 11,000 votes. Yeah.
Yeah, by huge numbers.
Yeah.
This time around, the same thing might be happening in Ontario, except for the Liberals, where they're doing really, really well in my riding, like High Park, and winning by a huge amount. So it makes the Ontario number overall look better, vote percentage look better for the Liberals than the number of seats they might be getting. So even if the Liberals have a, say, 4, 5, 6 point lead in the province of Ontario, if it's because they're trouncing the NDP downtown, which they don't normally do, it's closer downtown, the Conservatives might be doing a little better in the 905. To all the people who are watching this, is the donuts of seats in the Greater Toronto area outside of the 416. So that's car commuting suburbs. That might mean the Conservatives are a bit more competitive there than the polling actually makes it look. So that's what I'm going to be watching for. I think that the Liberals are over-indexing, overperforming in downtown Toronto, which means that the Tories, even if they're trailing in the province overall, might be doing a bit better in terms of seats. That's the big one. That's a question mark for me.
That's a very interesting insight, bit of information there, because you do associate that with the big Conservative ridings, that they just win and there'll be 3 votes for the Liberals somewhere, in Alberta or Saskatchewan. So to see that change. The other thing that I think people find confusing, which is, and I'll just make the statement simply, the Conservatives usually only form government in this country when the NDP do really well. So explain.
So that's because pardon me, Senator, there's a progressive group of voters in Canada, a block of voters, and there's a conservative block of voters. It's 60-40, progressive to conservative. So the Conservatives can do a little bit better than that. The Progressives can do a little bit worse, but it tends to be 60-40. If the bonus that the Conservatives have is there's only one party fishing in that pond, and that's the Conservative.
You don't count the People's Party as being significant.
No, not big enough. Okay. And particularly if they think that there's going to be a change election, that 500,000 people who voted for the People's Party the last time around, mainly because they didn't think Erin O'Toole was going to displace Justin Trudeau. So it was like a free protest vote against everybody.
Okay. Yeah.
If they think that what will happen is Mark Carney is going to lose, they're going to vote for the Conservatives, I would say, and we'll see the People's Party not do as well this time. But the Conservative bloc is, 40%, and the Liberal bloc, if there's 2 parties, like we saw in 2011, doing really well in that group, and they're dividing up the votes, then it's a lot easier for the Conservatives to come up the middle and win more seats. So this time around, the NDP is not doing its job. In most polls, they're either, high single digits or low double digits. Typically, they perform somewhere between 15 and 20. And if they're up closer to 20, then the Conservatives are probably winning the election. If they're down below 15, then probably the Liberals are winning the election.
And that's where they are, and that's why
Right.
the NDP is so, the party members are, many of them, upset with Jagmeet Singh that he had the option to call this election earlier, and he had the option to beat Jack Layton and become the leader of the opposition.
Yeah, there's two books I want somebody to write. One of them is what exactly the conversation was between Jagmeet Singh and his advisors, not on the previous budget, but the budget before that, a year ago. Because there is no way for anybody with any political sensibility in their minds to do what they did. Now, they'll give some malarkey policy explanation for why they did what they did, Medicare or dental care and whatever. They could have got that if they won the election, or whoever was in power.
Exactly.
They could have got that. And the Liberals were probably going to do it anyway. So, I mean, why they did it, who knows? But whatever that conversation was, somebody needs to write a book about that because it is absolutely what you do not do. What they did was they gave the Liberals an opportunity to recover by giving them back the timing of the election and allowing them to change their leader. If they would have gone last spring, they would have been forced to run with Justin Trudeau, and the NDP would have pulled the rug out from under them, and they probably could have passed them as the progressive option. So I would say that next time that the NDP selects a leader, pick somebody who actually understands something about politics, because they didn't this time. And the other book I want somebody to write, I think I've already told you this, I want to call it 3 Days in December.
Yes, exactly right. And I've put that on the table with a few people that I think should write that book, because we managed to get through the debates as well without anybody saying what happened there, Mr. Carney, especially in the English debate where there was a chance to ask a question. Mr. Carney, I think, made a big mistake asking Mr. Poilievre about his security clearance, which is one of those inside Ottawa things, and it's already been answered.
A combination of Brutus and Machiavelli. How did Justin Trudeau possibly think that he could get away with what he got away with? And Justin Trudeau's not stupid.
Yeah.
Right. So what was he told that made him believe that he was going to be able to pull off what was discussed over the course of that weekend?
And that Mark Carney was going to be his finance minister, and Chrystia Freeland was going to go off and negotiate free trade, and everybody was going to live happily ever after.
Yeah, well, it didn't turn out that way. That's why 3 Days in December is going to be a wonderful book.
Okay, you and Mr. Ibbotson get on it. You and Mr. Ibbotson get on it.
We've got a new book coming out, but
I know you do.
We'll talk a little bit about it. Who knows? Still writing it.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay, couple of things. We haven't really said the debates. I thought the French debate was just kind of flat, and the English debate was more interesting. But from the media's point of view, it became all about CBC fighting with Rebel News and whether or not the Elections Commission and Debate Commission should exist. And we kind of forgot about what the candidates were talking about.
Yeah, but a lot of people watched.
So that means fill in the blanks.
Well, I think that means a couple of things. It's the first time they really got to see Mark Carney in action, and he didn't dazzle.
Yeah, he didn't dazzle.
And we know that expectations were really high about his performance, like 2-1 over Pierre Poilievre. And the second thing is that we're not talking today about how offensive Pierre Poilievre was, right? Because that's normally what people feel about Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about a race that's probably going to be tightening over the space of the last week. So I put out on X last week, because there's always, and it's just the way the game is played, but there's always these pundits coming out saying, well, it was a knockout punch, or it was this, or it was that. Mm-hmm. Looking at it like it's a sporting event, or they're marking figure skating or whatever. I mean, it's the way that you see what the effect of the debate is like, wait 3 or 4 days and see what the polling says. Not the day of. Yeah. Day of polling on debates doesn't really show you very much. You have to wait 3 or 4 days to see when it settles in whether it has an effect. And so the polling that's going to be coming out during, today, tomorrow, midweek, that'll show you what the effect has been. And my suspicion is what you're going to see is that the race is tightened up.
And what about the rush to the polls over Easter weekend? A lot of people were very concerned about having all this politics imposed on Easter weekend, but also a time when families gather and people talk and try to convince each other. So what do you think it looks like it was an enthusiastic rush to the polls.
Okay, so I looked up this morning what the
Yeah.
turnout has been in election campaigns over the last, back to Confederation. So the highest percentage of turnout we've had since the year 2000 was 2015, it was 68%. So I hear people talking 80%.
Yeah.
Even the free trade election for Brian Mulroney back in 1988, some could argue somewhat similar to what we're going through right now.
Yeah.
Although I will remind people, there's nobody on another side in this one like there was on that one.
Exactly.
It's not like there's somebody who's supporting Donald Trump and somebody who's opposed to Donald Trump. They're both kind of on the same side, so it doesn't have the same dynamic. But even that election, it was only 75. So my expectation is we do a bit better than normal, somewhere maybe 70%. Probably sounds like a reasonable number. It wouldn't surprise me if it was in the 60s. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a little higher than 70%. Do I think it'll be 80? I think that's a stretch just based on historical behavior. I mean, the highest level of turnout I think we ever had was, I think, the Diefenbaker election in 57 was like 89 or something like that. So there's been times when it's been a bit higher, but it's not like 100% turning out. And by the way, just like in every summer, Senator, you were a journalist for a long time. What's the big easy story for journalists in the summertime? Cabinet shuffle.
Yeah.
There's cabinet. Okay, so what's the easiest story when in election campaigns? A surge of votes in the pre-election.
Yes.
And what
they have to keep people interested, or there'll be no viewership for the next week if they say it's over.
And I'm not saying that there isn't a surge of voting.
Yeah.
In pre-election voting. But what it is these days is the parties are better organized to do that than they used to be in the past. So yes, you can get a surge in pre-election voting, which by the way tends to benefit the Conservatives.
The early
if you
voting.
just ran the election based on the pre-election ballots, it tends to be the Conservatives. So but by the time we get to election day, the numbers kind of settle into where they typically are.
Yeah.
So I would expect that we'll get somewhere between 65 and 70. Might get a little higher, might get a little bit lower, but it won't be 80%, which I've been reading in the press. I mean, if it is 80%, it is truly an exceptional election.
Exactly. The other issue, I guess, is who's turning out, because as we touched on at the beginning, the Liberals are more dependent on women who are they vote more regularly, and boomers.
No, that's not true, Senator. They actually, the opposite. No, men more typically vote than women.
Really?
Yeah, by a lot.
Even in the boomer category?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, okay, I've been operating on a misapprehension there. So let's go to that larger. That's why they call me
Senator. I can.
Yeah, you can help me out. You can rescue me from my own lack of knowledge on this.
There's and younger women are the least likely to vote.
Yeah, the least likely. Yeah.
Yeah. So older men.
But boomers versus the XYZ.
Right. So there are more older women. And that's just a function of demography. So they're
sorry about that.
After the age of like 65, the gap is growing like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points. And until you get to 100, where the gap is 5 to 1 of women over men. So there's a lot of older women. The vote is big, but it's not because the percentage of women are voting is big.
It's just the base
there's
number.
A lot more of them.
Okay. So the Liberals are still counting on the boomers, hoping they can reach out to the younger gen. The Conservatives have been more focused on the XYZ and hoping they can steal some boomers, as with the ad we discussed about aging men golfing, that kind of thing. But who comes out to vote in those two groups?
The boomers.
Yeah. So that's another advantage liberal, right?
Yeah. So who votes? People who own houses, people who have a typical pattern of voting, people who are more religious, more regular church attendance, they tend to vote. People who are better educated tend to vote. I shouldn't say better. I should just say with more education.
Yeah.
Tend to vote. Higher income people tend to vote more. So those are the groups.
That's to that advantage. So with the impact of the Pope's passing, there'll be a lot of focus this week. The funeral might be as early as next Friday, Saturday, Sunday in that weekend.
Yeah,
literally.
I heard it was like 2 weeks away or something.
Well, I don't know. They keep getting different stories, as I'm hearing with one ear, but it's going to be present news for this week.
Yeah.
So again, how do they, as we commented, it's probably better for Mr. Carney if they're not talking about his spending plans, but it's also hard for everybody to be doing that last minute messaging. So what do they do this week?
Well, I think both of them are going to feature a different emphasis. So I think the Carney campaign, you're going to be seeing a lot of him.
Yeah.
I would think. Even as weak a candidate as he is, it really is for him is about leadership. I think the other thing they're going to do is they're going to smack back on the Conservatives and particularly Pierre Poilievre very hard. They want this election to be about leadership, and those are the two things that you do to push people onto that question. I think the Conservatives are going to be taking people on a walk down memory lane about the linkages between, Mark Carney, representing continuity with the previous Liberal administration, as opposed to somebody who's a change-oriented candidate, and they're going to really try not to so much emphasize Pierre Poilievre as they're going to try to emphasize the message of change.
So not going into the details of whether or not he's going to take oil out of the ground or build a pipeline or just that's too detailed. Just go, he's more of the same.
Yeah, if you guys like the last 10 years, get ready for another 4 just like them.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, but the polls will tighten, but people have to keep in mind how the votes are distributed in this country. And there's way more people in downtown Toronto than there is in Wadena, and 100 of them combined.
Yeah, if the Conservatives and Liberals, if the Liberals have like a 3, 4, 5 point lead in Ontario, that means it's very close in the 905.
Yeah.
And that election would be very interesting.
Yeah.
The Conservatives probably need late nationwide 2, 3, 4 points over the Liberals to be safe.
Yeah. No, your point about the voter efficiency in the cities is really an interesting one too to watch. Okay, you're not going to bet, right? I'm not going to bet.
It's a barn burner. And just for your listeners, I mean, most elections in Canada tend to be close, particularly when it comes to the popular vote. I mean, Justin Trudeau lost the popular vote in the last 2 elections.
Yeah.
Stephen Harper, of his 3 terms in government, 2 of them were minorities. We've only had 3 majority governments since the year 2000, and we've had many, many more elections than that. So elections tend to be close.
So is that how voters are saying kind of a pox on both your houses? I mean, literally, if you look at all 3 campaigns, the NDP campaign we discussed in detail about why would you make the fundamental decision to put yourself in this bind. The Conservatives, who have been criticized internally for not getting their message out or making it clear and too much focus on the leader. And then the Liberals kind of swooping in with, yes, the governor or former governor of the bank, but also more of the kind of elitist view of the world. And I'm here to solve all your problems. Like, none of these campaigns have been wildly successful.
No, I mean, the Conservatives, as I said, until probably the last 5 or 6 days have been spinning their wheels and finally have got some traction. And the message of why would you give them, and you notice that they've changed the way they're talking about it.
Yeah.
It's not Mark Carney as Justin Trudeau. It's why would you give these people another
Yeah.
4 years? So they're not even talking about leadership.
Yeah.
Saying, why would you give this group 4 more years? That's a different message than they started this campaign with.
Yeah.
And then Mark Carney and the Liberal Party trying to make this unidimensionally about the question of leadership. And we have the right resume for the times.
Yeah. Here's my CV. Take
Here's
a look.
my guy.
Yeah.
Jagmeet Singh, completely lost. But what he's got going for him is what the other two parties don't have. And we saw a good example of this in the Conservative Party, which is strong provincial parties.
Yeah.
So the NDP is the only party in Canada in which there is a formal relationship between the provincial wings and the national wing. So even if the NDP is not doing necessarily very well in the national polls, they tend to be quite organized on the ground. And the most recent Ontario election, invite your listeners to go back and take a look how much the Liberals beat the NDP by in terms of popular vote and how many seats the NDP won. I mean, they were supposed to lose a whole bunch of seats to Doug Ford, and they didn't.
Yeah, getting the vote out, as they say.
They're organized on the ground. So it's going to be anybody who says that they know exactly what is going to happen on election night right now. I think that's a dubious claim. Great
to talk to you, Darrell, Global CEO for Ipsos Public Affairs, and who has been with us through every day and every week of this campaign. And we'll talk again as the results are counted. You think it'll be pretty easy on election night?
Once we get so I expect that the Liberals are going to do a bit better in Atlantic Canada. Not a great harbinger for what happens in the rest of the country. Atlantic Canada it has a lot more local politics and what's going on in terms of voting. By the time you get to Quebec, if the Conservatives are actually winning 15 seats, it's going to be a long night.
Yeah.
Then we're going to hit Ontario, and if what I said is true,
exactly,
and I don't know that it is, where the Liberals are winning a whole bunch of Toronto seats by a lot of votes over the NDP, but the 905 is close, and maybe instead of going all one way or the other this time, we start seeing, the Conservatives winning the east end of the 905 and the Liberals winning the west end of the 905, then it's going to be a very long night.
Well, I shall see you on election night and in the days following that. So great. Thanks again for all your contributions and insights. We so appreciate your time.
My sincere pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. And that is it for this edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallen. We'll see you very soon. Thanks.